greatest thinkers of the 20th century once said, ideas shape the course of history. And if you look at the ASEAN, at its very core, it was an idea that was forwarded in the late 1960s by 5 countries. You're talking about Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia. And the hope was, at some point in time, this organization will expand and encompass all countries that you see there on the map, although I don't know why there are no boundaries for Laos, Vietnam, and Myanmar there. And you see, the origins of the ASEAN was very much shaped by the process of Cold War. I suppose you guys know about the Cold War. And if you look at the founders of ASEAN, most of them were aligned to the United States. Although Indonesia was initially not aligned, but eventually it will become an aligned country. But on the ashes of the Cold War, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the ASEAN finally becomes a post-ideological organization, a non-aligned organization, when we had the entry and membership of countries like Laos, Myanmar, Vietnam, Cambodia, countries that used to be on the other side of the fence during the Cold War. And over time, if you look at the ASEAN, we have to be very appreciative about it. If you look at it, it's a very resilient organization and it has been able to integrate all countries in the region together. If you look at the ASEAN countries, there are 2 characteristics that shapes them. First of all of them were former colonies, right? And shaped by the experience of colonization. And second, what? All of them are sandwiched between 2 major powers, India and China. And that's something that we all share together. And in fact, if you look at the integration process in ASEAN, there have been 2 major successes. On one hand, if you look at the ASEAN, since its founding in the late 1960s, no 2 ASEAN countries have gone to war with each other. And in my opinion, that's a great, great achievement. In fact, a few years ago, Cambodia and Thailand were mobilizing their forces to go almost to a war over a disputed temple in their border. And thanks to the intervention of the ASEAN and the leadership in Indonesia, they were able to actually prevent that kind of military escalation. Secondly, if you look at economic integration in the ASEAN, we have been very successful, so much so that we were able to actually finalize the ASEAN Free Trade Agreement among ourselves earlier than scheduled. But at the same time, that success provided us a sense of complacency and I think over-ambitiousness. So we felt that by 2015 we can create an ASEAN community, cultural, political, and economic. And hopefully next year we're supposed to come up with a common economic market. If you look at the plan for coming up with a common economic market, it's very much driven by competitive struggles. For the last 2 decades, ASEAN countries have been overshadowed by China, and most of the manufacturing hubs in places like Malaysia and Indonesia have moved to China. But in recent years, India is also emerging as a very credible alternative as the next center of globalization. And this is why we in the ASEAN are panicking, and we feel that we have to put ourselves together in order to provide a more alternative, a more kind of attractive market to international investors. So the process of integration is very much driven by that. But the problem is this. If you look at the ASEAN, first of all, again, there are 2 problems. I love those numbers. Number 1, if you look at the ASEAN, it has a capacity problem. For instance, the European Union has 30,000 people in charge of implementation of regional integration, right? Everything, labor mobility, economics, etc. In ASEAN, you only have 200 people to take care of that. I don't think that's enough if you really want to have a fully integrated region. The second problem, let me be a little bit jingoistic, is our problems in the West Philippine Sea. Alright? And the problems in the West Philippine Sea are really testing whether the ASEAN can hold itself together and have a unified position. For years, I've been very hopeful that we could stand up to our giant neighbor and have a unified position. But increasingly, I am becoming a little bit more pessimistic about this. And if you look at the latest ASEAN summit, China was clearly able to employ its divide and conquer strategy. And that is why in the ASEAN we have even failed to materialize the very promises that we had in early 2000s under Declaration of Conduct in the South China Sea. So we don't even have a code of conduct on how to resolve and peacefully settle and manage our disputes. So I think the ASEAN is at a critical juncture at this point in time. And I hope that in the coming years, for the sake of unity in the region and for the sake of having a dynamic economic bloc, we'll be able to also address our geopolitical differences with respect to China. Okay, is that 10 minutes already? 6? Okay, we still have 4 minutes. Okay. Since we have more time on that, let me focus on the issue of, let's put the geopolitical issue aside. I might be accused of trying to address a very complicated issue in a few minutes, but let me talk about the economic integration process. To be very honest, if you look at the assessment by all experts, it's very unlikely that we'll really have a common market by 2015. If you look at the projection by the Economist Intelligence Unit, friends in the ADB, friends in the ISIS, not the ISIS, Institute for Southeast Asian Studies in Singapore, we're more or less looking at 2020 or 2025 before we have a so-called ASEAN common market. The common market is not going to be like Europe. It's going to be a customs union. So we're not only going to focus on streamlining our tariffs and protection barriers for trade within the region, but also on what kind of protectionist barriers we're going to put in terms of our trade with the rest of the world. Now, what about us? What are we going to gain out of it? Who are the winners? Who are the losers? This is a very important question. Let me be very honest because I only have 2 minutes to do this, so I cannot sugarcoat this a lot. My sense is that if ASEAN pushes with this integration process, certain countries and certain individuals and conglomerates will have a lot of advantage. Which countries are in a position to make the best out of this? Singapore, Malaysia. They have the two most competitive economies. They have the most efficient banking sectors. They have the most efficient manufacturing sectors. They have advanced R&D. Singapore will be banks in Singapore, for instance, are 17 times bigger than our biggest bank, BDO, for instance. We're going to be decimated on that level. When it comes to R&D and manufacturing, it's very hard to compete with those countries. So Malaysia and Singapore will take advantage of this a lot. Who are the individuals who are going to be winners? You guys, well-educated guys from elite schools. Once we have a common market, it will be easier for you guys to travel to Singapore and work in Singapore and make a lot of money. Alright, so it's good for us, but it's not good for people in the agricultural sector. It's not good for people in the manufacturing sector. I very much fear that our friends in Myanmar and Cambodia who offer cheaper labor will be able to decimate us in the Philippines, so actually have a very weak manufacturing sector thanks to electricity prices, lack of infrastructure, etc. But who are the winners in terms of businesses? As I said, people who are in the agriculture and manufacturing sector are going to have a hard time. But who are going to make a lot of money out of this? As I predicted, and this is already happening, conglomerates. One of our sponsors, friends in Ayala, friends in SM. These are the guys who are competitive. And the fact of the matter is that if you look at the profit margins of these organizations, they're running out of market in the Philippines. They want to look for new markets. And when you have the ASEAN common market, they will be able to invest more in countries like Vietnam, in countries like Cambodia, even in places like Indonesia. So these are the guys who are going to be winners. Now, thankfully, most of us will more or less be among the winners, but as leaders, we have to care more than ourselves. Alright, let me stop there before I get more controversial. Thank you very much.